When I unfolded that old letter from the back of his desk drawer, the words hit me like a quiet storm. You were never enough. My hands trembled, the paper crinkling softly in the dim light of our study, and I felt a crack run through the foundation of my life, one I'd built brick by careful brick over 30 years. It was a rainy afternoon in Portland, the kind where the sky hangs low and gray, pressing down on the rooftops like an unspoken secret. I was 63, a librarian at the Multnomah County Library, surrounded by books that had always been my refuge. But that day, as I sat there alone in our craftsman home on the edge of Laurelhurst Park, the words blurred through my tears. My husband, Robert, had been gone for just over a month. Third attack, sudden and merciless. We'd been married for years, raised 2 children, built a life that felt solid, if not always passionate. And now this. A letter addressed to a woman I'd never heard of, signed by him, with that cruel phrase etched in his familiar, steady handwriting. I remember the smell of the room musty wood from the oak desk, mixed with the faint lavender from the sachets I kept in the drawers to ward off moths. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second stretching out like a question I didn't want to ask. How could he? Why now, when he was no longer here to explain? I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling my heart pound against it, and whispered to the empty air, Robert, what have you done? But let me take you back, before the letter, before the unraveling. My name is Susan, and my life had always been one of quiet rhythms, like the turning of pages in a well-loved novel. I grew up in a small town outside Seattle, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic, learning early that stories could transport you far beyond the confines of your world. I met Robert in college, at the University of Oregon. He was studying business, all ambition and charm, with a laugh that filled rooms and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. I was the shy English major, nose buried in Austin and Bronte, dreaming of libraries and rainy afternoons. We married young, 25 and 27, and moved to Portland for his job at a financial firm. It was the 80s, a time of big shoulders in suits and even bigger dreams. Robert climbed the ladder quickly, becoming a senior advisor, while I found my place among the stacks at the library. Our home was modest but warm, a 2-story with a wraparound porch, painted sage green to blend with the evergreens that dotted our neighborhood. I'd plant tulips in the spring, their petals unfurling like secrets, and Robert would mow the lawn on weekends, waving to neighbors with that easy grin. Our children came soon after. Emily first, now 30, a teacher herself in Seattle, married with 2 little ones of her own. Then Michael, 28, working in tech down in San Francisco, always calling home with updates on his latest project. They were the light of our lives, those kids. Family dinners were sacred, roast chicken on Sundays, the scent of rosemary wafting through the house, laughter echoing off the walls as we shared stories from our days. Robert would carve the meat with precise strokes, his voice booming as he recounted client meetings, while I passed the potatoes, listening more than speaking, content in the warmth of it all. Work was my sanctuary. The library smelled of aged paper and fresh ink, a hush broken only by the soft thud of books being shelved or the murmur of patrons. I'd curate reading programs for children, watching their eyes light up at story time, or help elderly folks find memoirs that mirrored their own lives. Colleagues called me the heart of the placeaways, a kind word, a recommendation tailored just so. Robert supported it, or so I thought. He'd joke about my bookish ways over coffee in the mornings, his hand brushing mine as we sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from our mugs like gentle promises. Our marriage wasn't perfect, no one's is. There were quiet nights when he'd stare out the window, lost in thought. Or times when his work trips stretched longer than expected. But I chalked it up to the stresses of life, the way couples do. We'd take walks in the park, leaves crunching underfoot in autumn, or share a glass of wine on the porch, watching the rain patter on the awning. "We're lucky, Susan," he'd say, his voice low and steady. "We've got a good thing here." And I'd nod, feeling the truth of it in my bones. Yet, looking back, there were shadows I ignored. Like how he'd sometimes lock his study door when balancing the checkbook. Or the way his eyes would flicker when Emily asked about his family history. His parents gone early. No siblings to speak of. "Just us now," he'd say, pulling her into a hug. I never pressed. Trust was the glue that held us. That changed on a Tuesday in early fall, about 3 weeks after his funeral. The house felt too big without him. Echoes in every room. Emily and Michael had come for the service, their arms around me as we scattered his ashes in the Willamette River, the water rippling gray under the clouds. They'd urged me to sort through his things, to find closure, Mom. So I did, starting with the study room lined with his files, financial ledgers stacked neatly. A photo of us on our wedding day, smiling from the shelf. I was organizing papers when I found the locked drawer. The key was taped underneath, as if he hadn't tried too hard to hide it. Inside, amid old tax returns and investment statements, was the envelope. Cream-colored, slightly yellowed with age, addressed to my dear Laura in his hand. My fingers hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach. Why hide a letter? Who was Laura? I slid it open carefully, the paper whispering as it tore. The date was from 30 years ago, just after Emily's birth. "Laura," it began. "Our time together was brief, but it gave us something precious. I can't be there as I'd like, but know that I'll provide for her always, Susan. She tries, but you were never enough." My breath caught her, a child. The words swam. Details of payments, a trust fund, instructions for secrecy. At the bottom, a postscript added more recently. "The estate will go to her when I'm gone. It's only right." I sank into his chair, the leather creaking under me, the rain drumming harder on the window. Disbelief washed over me first, then a cold anger. 30 years, a daughter, an affair. And that phrase, "you were never enough," it pierced like a thorn I'd carried unknowingly. How many lies had laced our life together? The next morning, I woke before dawn, the house still cloaked in that pre-light hush. The letter lay on the nightstand like a sleeping animal, waiting to bite. I'd read it again by lamplight until the words lost shape and became only pain. I rose quietly, the floorboards cool beneath my bare feet, and padded to the kitchen. The kettle clicked on with a soft pop, and I stood there in my robe, watching steam curl against the window like ghosts. I made teachable, the way Robert always hated. To floral, he'd say. Today it tasted like freedom, and like grief. I needed proof. One letter could be a forgery, a cruel joke, a mistake. My librarian's mind catalogued possibilities the way I once shelved returns. Neatly, efficiently, desperately. I opened his laptop password, still our wedding date. August 17, 1991, and found the folder labeled personal. Inside, bank statements, wire transfers, a scanned birth certificate. Laura Marie Ellison, born April 12, 1992, Portland, Oregon. Mother, Laura Ellison. Father, blank. But the payments monthly clockwork, $1,500 for 30 years were routed to an account in her name. My name was nowhere. Our joint savings, the retirement fund we'd scrimped for, the house Evoria thing funneled into a second trust, drafted 6 months ago. The final line of the attorney's cover letter: upon your passing, the entirety of the estate transfers to Laura Marie Ellison, per your instructions. I closed the laptop. The room smelled faintly of yesterday's coffee and the lemon polish I used on the table. My reflection in the dark window looked older than 63's, sunken, mouth a thin line. I touched the glass. It was cold. You planned to leave me with nothing, I whispered to the empty chair where he used to sit. Not even the truth. Emily called at 8. Mom, how are you holding up? Her voice was bright, careful. I could hear my grandbabies chattering in the background, the clatter of cereal bowls. I swallowed the storm in my throat. I'm managing, sweetheart. Just sorting papers. A lie, small and necessary. We're coming for the reunion next weekend, she said. Michael, too. Everyone wants to be together. Remember, Dad. The family reunion, Robert's idea, planned before the heart attack. A picnic at Laurelhurst Park. Cousins, aunts, his old college friends. He'd reserved the shelter, ordered the catered barbecue. I'd been dreading it, the forced cheer. Now it felt like a stage. After we hung up, I drove to the library. The parking lot was half empty, the building a low brick sanctuary under dripping firs. Inside, the air smelled of paper and raincoats. I waved to Marisol at the circulation desk. She gave me a sympathetic smile, assuming widow's grief. I went to my officia, small room with a window overlooking the children's garden, and closed the door. I needed quiet to think. First, I called the bank. The manager, a kind woman named Priya, confirmed the trust. Your husband removed you as beneficiary last March, Mrs. Whitcomb. I'm so sorry. Her voice softened, but the words landed like stones. March, when I'd been in the hospital with pneumonia, too weak to notice his late nights at the office. Next, I searched public records on my work computer. Laura Ellison, age 31, lived in Northeast Portland. Librarian at a private school. Single, no children. A photo from the school website. Auburn hair like Robert's had been, the same slight tilt to the chin when she smiled. My stomach lurched. She looked like Emily at that age, but softer, unguarded. I printed the page, folded it small, and tucked it into my purse like contraband. That evening, I sat on the porch swing, the chains creaking in the damp air. The neighbor's sprinkler hissed across the lawn, a rhythmic shoo-shoo. I dialed the number from the trust documents. It rang 4 times. Hello. A woman's voice, warm, curious. Laura Ellison. Yes. Who's this? I hesitated. The script I'd rehearsed dissolved. This is Susan Whitcomb, Robert Whitcomb's wife. Silence stretched, thick as fog. Then, oh, a small exhale. I wondered if you'd call. You knew. My voice cracked on the last word. Not everything. He told me when I was 16. Said my mother had been a mistake, but I wasn't. He sent money, birthday cards. Never visited after I turned 18. She paused. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I closed my eyes. Rain started again, soft on the roof. Did he tell you about the will? No. Surprise in her tone. He just said he was making things right. Making things right. The phrase twisted in my gut. I thanked her, hung up before my voice betrayed me. She hadn't sounded triumphant, only sad, careful. That made it worse. Somehow, over the next days, I moved through the house like a ghost. I cooked meals I didn't eat, watered plants that didn't need it. Michael arrived Thursday night, folding me into a hug that smelled of airport coffee. Mom, you look thin. Are you sleeping? I nodded, lied again. Emily came Friday with the kids, their small shoes thumping across the hardwood, filling the rooms with noise I couldn't feel. Saturday dawned clear, a rare blue sky. The reunion, I'd spent the week preparing not potato salad or lemonade, but evidence. I'd recorded my call with Laura on my phone, voice memos, crisp and damning. I'd printed the trust documents, the birth certificate, the bank transfers. I folded them into a manila envelope and slid it into my tote bag beside the sunscreen. The park was alive with relatives. Robert's cousin, Dale, flipping burgers. Aunt Ruth arranging brownies on a checkered cloth. Children chased each other through the grass, shrieks rising like birds. I smiled, greeted, accepted hugs that lingered too long. My hands shook only slightly as I set out the lemonade. At 2:00, Dale called everyone to the picnic tables. A few words about Robert, he began, voice thick. I stood at the edge of the group, heart hammering against my ribs. When he finished, I stepped forward. I have something to say too. My voice carried, steady despite the tremor inside. Conversation hushed. Phones lowered. I pulled the envelope from my bag. Robert was a good provider, I started. A devoted father, a loving uncle. But he was also a man who kept secrets. I opened the envelope, held up the birth certificate. This is Laura Marie Ellison, born 1992, Robert's daughter. Gasps rippled. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Michael's eyes widened. I played the recording me voice, Laura's, the careful dance of truth. Then the bank statements, projected onto a white sheet I'd hung between two trees like a makeshift screen. The numbers glowed, 30 years of payments, the trust, the erasure of my name. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The facts spoke, cold and clear. When it ended, silence pressed heavy. Then Aunt Ruth whispered, "Susan." I met her eyes, saw shock, pity, anger on my behalf. Dale's face had gone red. Someone started to criminally, I think. I folded the papers. I'm not here to ruin a memory. I'm here because lies have weight, and I've carried enough. My voice cracked on the last word, but I lifted my chin. The money Robert set aside for Laura is hers. I won't fight it. But the house, our savings, the life we built together, those stay with the family he raised. I've already spoken to an attorney. I walked away then, legs trembling, and sat on a bench beneath an oak. The leaves rustled overhead, sunlight dappling the ground. Michael found me first, sat without speaking, his arm around my shoulders. Emily followed, tears streaking her face. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "I needed you to hear it with everyone else," I said. So no one could say I twisted the story. The rest of the afternoon, Blahredkissens approaching in ones and twos, some angry at Robert, some at me for the public airing. I accepted their words, offered none in return. When the sun dipped low, I packed the leftover lemonade and drove home alone. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad. I wrote a new will, the house to Emily and Michael, a scholarship fund for local kids, in Robert's name. Becca's, even flawed men can leave good behind. And every penny from our joint savings, the retirement account he hadn't touched, I redirected to the library's literacy program. Children who struggled to read, families new to English. Let his money teach someone to find their voice. I sealed the envelope, addressed it to my attorney, and set it by the door. Then, I opened my laptop and began to type not a letter, not a journal, but a poem. The first line came slow. I was the keeper of his secrets, until I became the keeper of my own. The days after the reunion blurred into a quiet rhythm, like the turning of seasons in our damp Portland climate. The leaves outside my window shifted from green to gold, carpeting the lawn in a mosaic of what was lost. I returned to the library on Monday, my steps heavier but deliberate. Marisol greeted me with a hug, her perfume a faint rose that lingered. "We missed you," she said, eyes searching mine. I nodded, managed a smile, and dove into the stacks organizing returns, recommending titles to patrons whose faces blurred in my exhaustion. But the ache didn't fade. It simmered, a low hum in my chest. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie in our bed, his side still indented, faintly from years of habitant replay, the letter's words. "You were never enough." It echoed like a cruel refrain. To silence it, I turned to what I knew best: words. That first poem grew into more, scribbled in the margins of my planner during lunch breaks, or late at night with a cup of tea cooling beside me. They weren't elegant at first draw lines about cracked foundations, hidden roots twisting underground. But they flowed, a release like exhaling after holding breath too long. One afternoon, about 2 weeks later, I wandered into Hawthorne Books, a small independent shop a few blocks from the library. The bell tinkled softly as I entered, the air thick with the scent of fresh ink and aged leather bindings. Shelves bowed under the weight of novels, poetry collections tucked in corners like secrets. I'd come for solace, browsing the verse section, my fingers trailing spines. Mary Oliver, Adrienne Rich, women who'd turned pain into something sharp and beautiful. "Can I help you find something?" The voice came from behind the counter, gentle, with a hint of gravel, like pages turning on a windy day. I looked up to see a man in his late 50s, salt and pepper hair, tousled, glasses perched on a nose that had seen a break or two. His name tag read, Thomas, owner. "I'm looking for poetry on loss," I said, my voice smaller than intended. "Not the greeting card kind. Something real." He nodded, no pity in his eyes, just understanding. "Try this." He pulled a slim volume from a nearby shelf, Frida Dove's Mother, Love. It's about Demeter and Persephone, but really about holding on and letting go. Our hands brushed as he passed it. His were calloused, ink-stained at the fingertips. I bought it, and as he rang me up, we talked. About books, first way a good poem could crack you open. Then, haltingly, about Robert. Not the betrayal, not yet, but the emptiness left behind. Thomas listened, leaning on the counter, the shop quiet save for the hum of the espresso machine in the back. "I lost my wife 5 years ago," he shared. "Cancer. I buried myself in inventory to cope. But words, they pull you through." I left with the book and a lightness I hadn't felt in weeks. The next day, I returned not for a purchase, but for coffee. The shop had a small cafe nook, mismatched chairs around wooden tables, the smell of fresh grounds mingling with paper. Thomas waved me over. "Back so soon." We sat, steam rising from our mugs like shared confessions. I told him more about the letter, the daughter, the reunion. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as I spoke. He didn't interrupt, just nodded, his eyes steady behind those glasses. "That's a heavy load," he said, when I finished. "But you exposed it. That takes strength." "It doesn't feel like strength," I admitted, stirring my coffee absently. The spoon clinked against the ceramic. "It feels like surviving. Sometimes that's the same thing." He paused, then pulled a notebook from his apron pocket. "I write to bad haikus, mostly. Help sort the mess." He slid it across. Scribbles filled the pages, short bursts about rain-slick streets, empty chairs at dinner. That sparked something. We started meeting weekly Thursdays after my shift. We'd read poems aloud, his voice rich and measured, mine gaining confidence. One evening, as rain pattered on the shop's tin roof, I shared my own work. I was the shore he eroded. I read, wave by wave, until I learned to reshape myself. Thomas set his mug down, the thud soft. That's powerful, Susan, raw, but true. Our bond grew quietly, like ivy climbing a trellis. No rush, no fireworks, just two souls finding common ground in loss. He'd recommend books. Louise Glck for her unflinching gaze, Pablo Neruda for the ache of love gone wrong. I'd bring library discards, volumes with dog-eared pages, and we'd discuss them over scones, crumbs scattering like forgotten worries. Through it, I healed. The poems became a collection, 30 pieces, bound in a simple notebook, titled Unearthed. I shared them at a library reading one crisp November evening, the room filled with patrons and a few colleagues. Thomas sat in the front row, applauding first when I finished. Emily and Michael came too, their pride warming me more than the spotlights. "You're blooming, Mom," Emily whispered afterward. Her hug fierce. The money from the savings funded the literacy program beautifully. We launched it in December, a room at the library dedicated to workshops, stocked with books in multiple languages, tutors, volunteering time. I saw Robert in it, somehow, not the man who betrayed, but the one who'd taught our kids to value education. Forgiveness crept in, not full, but enough to soften the edges. Thomas and I took walks in the park, leaves crunching underfoot, our conversations weaving from books to dreams deferred. One day, as we sat on the same bench where I'd retreated after the reunion, he took my hand. "You're enough, Suzanne." More than his words landed soft, mending that old wound. Life didn't snap back to perfect it, reshaped, like clay on a wheel. I volunteered more, wrote daily, laughed easier. The house felt less empty, filled now with my own echoes. And in the quiet moments, I'd reflect. Betrayal breaks you, but what you build from the peace, that's yours alone. As winter settled over Portland, the rains turned relentless, drumming on the roof like persistent memories. I found myself at Hawthorne Books more often, the shop becoming a second home. Thomas would brew Tyrrell Grey for him, peppermint for me, and we'd sit in the back room, surrounded by unshelved arrivals, their spines promising new worlds. The air carried the faint must of old pages mixed with the sharp tang of fresh glue from repaired bindings. Our conversations deepened, weaving through the fabric of our pasts. One evening, as snow flurried outside the window, a rare dusting that turned the streets to hush, I told him about the reunion in full. The gasps, the tears, the way Emily had clutched Michael's arm like a lifeline. Thomas listened, his fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table, eyes never leaving mine. "You didn't just expose him," he said softly. "You reclaimed your story. That's not revenge. That's justice." I nodded, the warmth from the radiator seeping into my bones. It felt like shedding a skin I'd outgrown. But the kids, they're still processing. Emily had called weekly since, her voice a mix of anger and sorrow. "Dad was human, Mom, but this, it's like he was two people." Michael was quieter, sending texts with articles on grief, as if logic could mend the tear. I'd invited Laura to coffee once, a tentative bridge. She came, nervous, her hands wrapped around a latte-like armor. We talked for hours about her mother, gone young from illness. about Robert's sporadic letters, promises He said you were kind, she admitted. That he didn't deserve you. We parted with no promises, but a shared understanding. We were both his unfinished chapters. Poetry became my anchor. I'd write in the mornings now, before the world woke, the kitchen lit only by the stove's glow. Lines about fractured mirrors, reflections pieced together with gold-like kintsugi. The Japanese art Thomas had shown me in a book. Broken things can be beautiful, he'd said, turning the page to reveal a vase mended with shimmering veins. One submitted a few poems to local journals, anonymous at first. When one was accepted a small press, called Rain City Review, I celebrated alone with a slice of pie from the corner bakery. The crust, flaky and sweet against the tart apples. The literacy program flourished under my guidance. We named it Open Pages, a nod to the doors Robert's secret had flung wide. I led the first workshop myself, a group of immigrant families huddled in the new room, its walls painted soft blue like a calm sky. A young boy from Somalia traced letters with his finger, his mother's eyes shining as he sounded out home. The funding covered tutors, books, even tablets for digital stories. Colleagues patted my back. Patrons thanked me in whispers. But the real gift was watching lives shift. A single mother earning her GED, a grandfather reading to his grandkids for the first time. Robert's money, once a weapon, now a tool for good. Thomas and I took our time. No rushing into definitions. We were both cautious, scarred by loss. We'd stroll Alberta Street on clearer days, popping into galleries, the air crisp with fried dough from food carts. He'd point out murals' vibrant splashes of color against brick and I'd see metaphors in them. Life layered over old wounds. One Saturday, he invited me to a poetry reading at a nearby cafe. The room was dim, candles flickering on tables, the scent of espresso grounding the air. Poets shared verses, raw and resonant. When it was open mic, Thomas nudged me. Heart-pounding, I stood, my poem about unearthed roots trembling in my voice. Applause followed, warm and genuine. Afterward, Thomas squeezed my hand. See? You're blooming. Spring arrived tentative, buds unfurling on the cherry trees like hesitant apologies. The house sold quickly, Emily, and Michael insisted I downsize, find something mine. I chose a cozy bungalow near the library, with a sunroom perfect for writing. Packing Robert's things was cathartic, his suits to charity, his books donated. One kept a few photos as young and laughing, the kids as toddlers. Not for nostalgia, but as reminders of what was real amid the fiction. Laura visited once more, this time with a photo album her mother had left. Pages of baby pictures, a few with Robert Talkward, holding her like something fragile. I don't want his money if it hurts you, she said, voice soft. I shook my head. Take it. Build something good. We hugged goodbye. A tentative family forged in forgiveness. With Thomas, things deepened naturally. A shared dinner at my new place. Pasta I overcooked slightly, wine he brought from a local vineyard. Laughter over spilled sauce, then quiet talk by the fire. I didn't expect this, I confessed, his arm around me. Neither did I, he replied. But here we are. The poems culminated in a self-published chapbook sold at Hawthorne Books. Thomas designed the cover, a single leaf, veined and resilient. At the launch, friends gathered, library staff, Emily with the grandkids, Michael, via video. I read the final piece, From the Ashes of Not Enough, I rise, whole and unapologetic. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were cleansing, not bitter, Life now is quieter, richer. Mornings with coffee and verse, afternoons among books, evenings with Thomas reading aloud, planning trips to the coast. The betrayal lingers like a faint scar, but it no longer defines. I've learned that enough is what we claim for ourselves, not what others withhold. By summer, the bungalow had become my haven. Sunlight streamed through the sunroom windows in golden shafts, illuminating the desk where my notebook lay open, pages filled with verses that captured the ebb and flow of mending. The air carried the scent of blooming jasmine from the small garden I'd planted, whining vines that climbed the fence like hopeful fingers reaching for light. I'd wake early, brew coffee in the French press Thomas had gifted me, the grounds releasing their rich, earthy aroma as hot water bloomed over them. Sipping slowly, I'd write lines about rivers carving new paths after floods, about soil enriched by what was once debris. Thomas and I fell into a gentle routine. He'd close the shop early on Wednesdays, and we'd cook together simple meals, like grilled salmon with herbs from my garden, the sizzle of fish on the pan mingling with our easy chatter. His laughter filled the kitchen, deep and unhurried, chasing away the last shadows of loneliness. One night, as we washed dishes side by side, suds bubbling in the sink, his sleeve rolled up to reveal a faded tattoo from his navy dash, turned to me, "Susan, I've been thinking about us." His voice was soft, the dish towel twisting in his hands. I set down the plate, water dripping from my fingers. "Me too." We sat at the table then, the overhead light casting a warm glow. He spoke of his wife, Eleanor. Her illness had taught him to cherish the quiet moments. How he'd closed off after her passing. "You opened that door again," he said, his hand covering mine. It was calloused from turning pages, steady like an anchor. I shared more about Robert, not the betrayal, but the good years. Picnics with the kids, his pride at my library promotions. He wasn't all shadow, I admitted. But I see clearer now. That conversation led to plans. A weekend trip to the Oregon coast, where we'd walk beaches strewn with agates, the salt air stinging our cheeks, waves crashing in rhythmic applause. We rented a cottage overlooking the sea, the kind with creaky floors and a fireplace that snapped with driftwood flames. Evenings, we'd read poetry to each other, his choices bold and modern, mine classic and introspective. One dawn, as fog lifted from the water, he kissed me, gentle questioning. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never known. Back in Portland, the literacy program expanded. With the redirected savings over $200,000 after taxes, and ISHI hired a part-time coordinator, a young woman named Sophia, with a passion for bilingual stories. I mentored her, showing her how to pair books with readers, a Vietnamese family discovering folktales that echoed their own, a teenager grappling with dyslexia through graphic novels. The room buzzed on Saturday, children's voices rising in excited reads, parents nodding along. One afternoon, a boy named Javier finished his first chapter book, his grin wide as he high-fived me. "Mrs. Susan, I did it." His mother's eyes welled. She hugged me, whispering thanks in accented English. In those moments, Robert's legacy transformed, not erased, but redeemed. Emily visited often, bringing the grandkids. We'd bake cookies in the bungalow's tiny kitchen, flour dusting the counters like fresh snow, their small hands pressing dough into shapes. "Grandma, tell us a story," they'd beg, and I'd spin tales from my poems, adventures of hidden treasures found in unlikely places. Emily watched, her expression soft. "You're different now, Mom, stronger." We talked late into the nights about forgiveness, how it wasn't forgetting, but choosing not to let hurt define you. She confided her own marriage strains, work stress, the pull of parenthood, and I listened, offering the wisdom I'd earned the hard way. Michael came less frequently. His tech job demanding, but when he did, it was purposeful. He helped set up a website for my chapbook, Unearthed, now available online through Thomas's shop. "Mom, this could go viral," he said, fingers flying over the keyboard. Sales trickled in local readers mostly, but a few from afar. Reviews praised the honesty, a voice that resonates with quiet power. It wasn't about fame. It was about sharing the path from broken to whole. Laura and I built a fragile connection. Emails at first, updates on her life as a school librarian. Photos of her classroom decorated with student art. Then a meeting at a neutral cafe, neutral ground. She brought a letter her mother had written before passing, words about Robert's charm, his regret. She forgave him, Laura said, sliding it across the table. I read it, the paper soft from years, and felt a knot loosen. So can I. We didn't become family overnight. But we shared holidays, tentatively, Thanksgiving, at Emily's, where Laura met the grandkids. Her laughter blending with theirs over pie. Through it all, poetry remained my compass. I joined a writers' group at the library, Tuesdays in the conference room, smelling of fresh coffee and markers. We'd critique gently, encourage boldly. My work evolved less about pain, more about growth. Blooms pushing through concrete, stars visible after storms. Thomas submitted one of my pieces to a national anthology. When it was accepted, we celebrated with a walk in the park, cherry blossoms falling like confetti. Now, at 60, I look back on that letter as a catalyst, not a curse. It shattered illusions, yes, but revealed truths about resilience, about love's many forms. Thomas and I plan a future simple, shared. The kids thrive, Laura finds her place, and me. I write, I teach, I live fully, funnily enough. Summary.